This is my FE3 presentation for my experience at Franklin County Medical Center this semester. I hope it's enjoyable, interesting, and informative for your clinical practice. A little background on this facility. It's located in Preston, Idaho, and Franklin County Medical Center's mission is to provide professional care that patients can trust and to improve the community as much as possible. This is found on fcmc.org. The actual building that I was in was the Developmental Disabilities Agency, which is a separate building from the main Franklin County Medical Center's building. The supervising music therapist there was Danielle Crow, and her approach to music therapy was integrative. She used behaviorist, analytic, and neurologic techniques, but her main approach to treatment was humanistic. So group size for us really varied from week to week. At times our group was 4 clients, sometimes it was 7 clients. It really depended on the week. The ages of our clients ranged from 9 to 13 years old, and they displayed various conditions and abilities. One client had cerebral palsy, one had Down syndrome, and several had moderate to severe autism spectrum disorder. As the assessment that we conducted revealed, the needs that these clients showed were they needed help in social skills, they needed help in interacting within a group, and they needed help with emotional regulation. A quick definition here, or a term that we used a lot in our treatment, unexpected behaviors. When a client was showing a extreme emotion or a behavior that was not aligned with what the therapist needed the client to do, that was called an unexpected behavior. And we'll revisit that term again a little bit later, but just be aware for that term and that it was important for this group. So the assessment, excuse me, my slide skipped forward. The assessment at this site was quite comprehensive. We were to assess 5 domains: physical, cognitive, social, emotional, and music or preferential. Another part to this assessment was that it was to be non-musical. So let's delve a little bit more into each domain in a little more detail. So me and my partner were developing the protocol and the tools for this assessment. How we decided to assess the physical domain was through a game of Simon Says. Now, a quick, brief synopsis of what this game is in case you don't know it. In Simon Says, one person is selected to be Simon, and Simon directs the group to do various movements or motions. And Simon can choose to either say, Simon says, pat your head, and if the other players of the game do pat their head, then they win that round. Simon can also choose to say, pat your head, not saying the actual phrase Simon says. In that case, if the game participants pat their head when Simon didn't say Simon says, then they lose that round. So how this pertains to our assessment is that to assess the physical domain, we just want to get a general overall view of what our clients' gross motor movement abilities were. And so how we did this is that one of us was Simon for that round, and we, as Simon, we directed the group to do 4 different motions that would give us a pretty comprehensive view of what their gross motor movement abilities were. So as you can see here, let's take a look at the little tool that we have, this little table. So here we've got the clients on this one end. They're abbreviated, of course, for confidentiality. And then we've got the 4 motions that we prompted the clients to do. So Simon says, give yourself a hug. That was to assess if they could do cross-body arm movement. The one Simon says, reach as high as you can to see if they could reach, a reaching motion. Simon says, wave a flag to see if they could do a waving motion. And then Simon says, stomp your feet, if they could move their legs and their feet. Taking a look at our scores and also the key. So it says right here, a score of 0 meant that the client did not do or is not able to do the behavior that we told them to. A score of 1 says that they're able to do it sometimes, but they were a little inconsistent. And then a score of 2 says that they were consistent and that they were able to do it. So just quickly scanning our results, all of the clients did very well in this domain. They were very consistent in their responses, except for this client here, who he had severe autism spectrum disorder, and he needed hand-over-hand assistance for all the behaviors. All right, the next domain, cognitive. We stayed with the game of Simon Says, but we changed it a little bit. So what we did here is that we then turned it over to the clients a little bit and said, who wants to be Simon for this round? And when a client volunteered to be Simon, we observed 2 things, well, 3 things, but in 2 parts. So the first part of it was that we observed the client who had volunteered to be Simon. And we observed, were they able to give directions of the group to do a movement? And so we observed their ability to do that. Then, as far as the other participants go, we observed them and observed if they were able to understand the concept of the game and fulfill the concept of the game. So, for example, if the client who was being Simon said, Simon says pat your head, if they did that, then they got a score. If the client who was being Simon would be tricky and said, pat your head, and the clients did pat their head, then they would get a little bit lower score. We were just trying to observe and see if they understood the concept of the game. And that was our indication of their cognitive abilities. All right, that's the cognitive domain. All right, our assessment of the social domain. So we changed gears for this one, and we paired the clients together and directed them to ask a get to know you question. So we would put them in pairs and then tell them to ask your partner what their favorite ice cream flavor is, or another get to know you question like that. What we were trying to see is if the clients would maintain eye contact with their partner and if they were able to ask each other a get to know you question. So me and my partner thought that this would be these two focuses, eye contact and seeing if the client could ask a get to know you question. We thought that that would be a pretty good indicator of their social skill ability. So here we've got our tool right here, and we see that the responses are quite varied for this domain. Okay, the emotional domain. For this one, what we did is that we told a story about a person named Greg, and Greg was going on a hike. On his hike, Greg encountered various situations that evoked certain emotions. At this point, we then paused and asked a client a few questions about the situation that Greg was in. So we asked them, what do you think Greg is feeling right now? We asked them, what would you be feeling if you were Greg? And then we asked them to share an experience when they may have felt that emotion that they named. And so a little explanation about the key here. You see it's a little bit different. We've left our numerical score key and instead have done these abbreviations. I will explain a little bit later what these mean, but for now, these abbreviations, these words and these letters mean a prompting hierarchy. And down here in the tool, they're just the abbreviations of these different words in the prompting hierarchy. A quick scan of our assessment results here. Again, results are varied. We see that our client with the severe ASD, he is nonverbal and really only answer yes and no questions. So that is noted down there. And finally, the final domain is the music or preferential. All we did for this one was ask the clients what their favorite songs were and what their favorite instruments were. As you can see, we've got some interesting and varied responses here. With a client with severe ASD, the aides had to jump in and assist and tell us that he did prefer songs from Mickey Mouse Clubhouse and Big Bang Theory. And with the favorite instrument, Danielle let us know that he really enjoys instruments, anything with a mallet that he can play. So a brief summary of the assessment results. The social and emotional domains were the biggest area of need for our clients. So the next step that we needed to take was to derive goals and objectives from our assessment data. There was another part to this, in that for Franklin County Medical Center, there are 3 goals already provided by the Medicaid plan that the site is on. And these goals are to increase social skills, increase coping skills, and to decrease maladaptive behaviors. So our job was to take the data that we derived from our assessment and the things that we found from our assessment, take goals and objectives from that, and then also fit those goals and objectives into the 3 Medicaid goals. So now let's delve a little bit deeper into the goals and objectives that we created. So goal 1.0, increase social skills. Our objective here is that the client will engage in leadership, following leadership, and partnership activities with 80% independence by November 19th, 2020. That percentage there, the percentage of independence, will make a little bit more sense later once I explain the prompting hierarchy. So after talking to Danielle about our assessment data, and especially the data we received on the social domain, she advised us to focus on behaviors of leadership, following leadership, and partnership activities in this domain. So she gave us some indication of some specific behaviors to really focus on in this broad domain. All right, goal 2.1, increase coping skills. The objective here, client will demonstrate emotional regulation with 75% independence when prompted by a music therapy student by November 19th, 2020. Again, we asked Danielle for a little bit of advice here on what exactly to focus on in the broad domain of emotion. And she advised us to focus on emotional regulation, specifically unexpected behaviors that the clients would show. And our third goal, goal 3.0, decrease maladaptive behaviors. Our objective, client will remain focused during a transition with 80% independence by November 19th, 2020. This one relates a little bit to the previous objective. And to explain this, let me focus a little bit on transition. So how we planned our sessions is that we had different interventions. And in between those interventions, we had a short little script or a little action or something that we would do to help the clients end that intervention and then transition to the next one. Sometimes it was as simple as, okay, thank you so much for engaging in that last activity. Now we're going to do this. So that's what the transition is. The transition was a prime time for clients to display unexpected behaviors because we were no longer engaging in a musical activity, and they would very easily lose focus and get distracted. And so we decided to really focus this goal of decreasing maladaptive behaviors on the transitions, because the transitions were such a common place for clients to get sidetracked. So those were the 3 goals and objectives that we came up with. General treatment strategies. So this was the part of my experience that I feel that I grew a lot, and I grew a lot in my understanding of music therapy and different ways to do it and different ways to approach treatment. I really appreciated these things that I walked away with. So let's go ahead and dive in. This is something that I call Danielle's flower concept, and it pertains to how we structured and how we planned our sessions. So let's go ahead and dive into this and explain what it is. So here we've got our little flower diagram, right? The flower center is a social skill lesson. So basically, a social skill that we would focus on that would be the central theme of that session. So for example, we did a session that was focused entirely on taking turns, that social skill. So that's our center there, taking turns, okay? So then each intervention is represented by these petals, okay? Each intervention would connect to and revisit the central social skill lesson. So let's use our real life example. With this taking turns, with taking turns, this taking turns session, we did an improvisation intervention, where the other clients were given rhythmic instruments, and one client was chosen to be a soloist first, and that client would play a xylophone. The other clients would have to play their instruments and wait their turn to be the soloist. So that was all part of the taking turns intervention. So coming back to our little diagram here, we have that taking turns central concept. We have our improvisation intervention that we're going off of. We're going a little bit away from that central lesson, but coming to an end, we then come right back to that central social skills lesson. And during the transition, as we're wrapping up the intervention, we say, wow, what did you learn about taking turns? And we really revisit and discuss and talk about that central social skills lesson. And then each intervention after that also goes out and always revisits and ties back to that central social skills lesson. That's the heart of the session. So that was a fascinating concept that Danielle showed us and that we use frequently in planning our sessions. All right. The next general treatment strategy really has to do with our objectives 2.1a and 3.0a. Now, maybe you caught it as I was explaining, but these objectives really did not have a defined behavior that we were looking for or that we were addressing. But they definitely did. There was an intervention strategy that we used to address these, and that was the prompting hierarchy. Now, I'll explain that in a minute, more in depth, what the prompting hierarchy is. But let me go over to this little diagram here and explain this concept a little more. So here you've got this red box, right? This red box right here. This red box represents the interventions that we would do in our session, okay? And the interventions that we would do in our session were really tied to this, our goal 1.0, because we would do interventions of partnership, we would do interventions of leadership, and we would do interventions of following leadership, which is what this goal point 1.0 was really all about. So here we've got our red box, our intervention box, right? Inside the intervention box, we have various shapes, and these shapes represent different unexpected behaviors that would crop up during the intervention, and tying it to the goal 3.0 during the transition as well. But the point is that different unexpected behaviors would arise in the session. So how we addressed these unexpected behaviors that would arise is through the prompting hierarchy. And as you can imagine, you can't always plan for the unexpected behaviors that will arise. You don't know when they'll arise, you don't know how, you don't know which client will do what. You can get general ideas based on past patterns of behavior, but the way we addressed our objectives and our goal here for 2.1 and 3.0, it really depended upon the unexpected behaviors that would arise within the intervention. And now to talk a little bit more about that intervention strategy, the prompting hierarchy. Okay, so the prompting hierarchy. This was a really unique thing that caught me off guard when I first came to this site, but I really began to appreciate, and it taught me a lot about different therapeutic strategies. So the prompting hierarchy is a numerical scale, and it was the main way that we collected our data. And another important part of it is that you always start with the highest level of independence. So let's delve into this a little bit more here. So here we've got 6 levels, and let me explain what each of these means. So a score of 5 equals an independent response. So let me give an example. Let's say you ask, the expected behavior is for the client to shake their shaker. So you give that direction, and the client shakes their shaker without further prompting. That would be a score of 5 because they did it independently. All right, 4, indirect verbal. So the client doesn't shake their shaker. You go to the very next level here, and you give them an indirect verbal, which is kind of an indirect verbal prompt is a way to prompt the behavior without directly asking the client to do it. So for example, an example of an indirect verbal prompt would be to ask the client, what do you need to do with your shaker? So you're not directly telling them to shake your shaker, but you're just reminding them what maybe they need to do. That's a score of 4. A score of 3 is a direct verbal, which pretty self-explanatory. You directly tell the client what they need to do. So direct verbal, you tell them, shake your shaker. A score of 2, modeling or model, is where you show the client by your own physical motion, or maybe you have a shaker yourself, but you show the client, shake your shaker. You show them by modeling to them. That's a score of 2. A score of 1, physical. That is hand-over-hand assistance. So if the client is still not shaking their shaker, go over, take their hand, and help them shake their shaker. That's a score of 1. A score of 0 is if the client refuses to do the expected behavior. So putting this a little bit more into context. So this is a hypothetical situation. Here you've got some clients. The situation here is that they're doing an ensemble type intervention. So you as the therapist, they have these different pipes that they blow into the end, and it makes a fun sound. And the point is, for when you as the therapist point to the client, they're supposed to play their instrument, but not before. The expected behavior is for them to play their instrument when you point at them. Okay, so we've got this ensemble type intervention going on. So starting with our client Jill here, you point at her and she plays her instrument without any further prompting. She gets a score of 5. Okay, now you've got your client Tom. You point at him, he doesn't play his instrument. So then you go to the next level. Okay, he didn't get a 5, let's do a 4. Indirect verbal prompt. Tom, what are you supposed to do when I point to you? Still nothing. So not a 4, go to a 3, direct verbal. Tom, play your instrument. And he plays it, so he gets a score of 3 right here. And then Bobby, you start at the top, you point at him, nothing, no response. So 4, indirect verbal prompt. What are you supposed to do when I point at you, Bobby? Nothing, okay, go to a 3. Bobby, play your instrument. Nothing, okay, go to a number 2, and you use the therapist to say, you model putting the instrument to your mouth, and you model blowing and say, Bobby, play your instrument. Bobby does play his instrument at that point, and so you give him a score of 2. Now, how this applies to our data in a session, what we would do with these numerical scores is then add them up and take the average and then create a percentage from that. Another way to explain this is that out of all the possible responses, so for here, you've got 3 clients. The highest possible score that all 3 could get would be 15, right? Because if all of them got the highest score, 5 times 3 is 15. Then you add up what actually happened. You add up each of these scores and put that result over 15. Create a percentage from that, and you've got that data, that percentage for that intervention. We'll revisit that a little bit later when we talk more about data. So intervention strategies explained a little bit more. This deals with the basic session structure that we had, that the session pattern that we would do every week. So we would start with the hello song. My partner, Addie Heflin, composed it. It was a really great hello song. And we sang the song. In the song, we welcomed the clients to the session. And then we would go client by client and ask the client to show us how they were feeling by emotion. And then in the song, we would then invite the other clients to do that motion too. Then we would do that client by client. That was our hello song, and it was how we welcomed the clients to the session. The next thing we did was we had written a group rules wrap. And this wrap outlined 6 different rules that we had created for our group, kind of like a group contract, if you will. So the group rules wrap. And that was specifically addressing objective 2.1a, where we were outlining the expected behaviors so that when a client went outside the rules, went outside the expected behaviors, then we could prompt them to come in line with the expected behavior. All right. And then, of course, we had various interventions that focused around the central social skill lesson, as I described earlier. And the social skill lessons that we chose to be our center of the flower were usually one of the group rules. That was part of our group rules wrap. After all the interventions and all the transitions and everything, all the reminders of our social skill lesson, we always ended with breathing in, breathing out, which is a relaxation type song where we invite the clients to join us in breathing, taking deep breaths and breathing out with the rhythm of the music. Okay, now here's an experiential that I would invite you all to join me in, our group rules wrap that we wrote. So we created a little poster that we showed the clients every session. We passed the poster around. We made sure everyone could see it, and like we would tell them, you remember our group rules, right? Yeah, let's go ahead and let's do our wrap. So where you are, if you wouldn't mind joining me in this experience. Here I've got the lyrics of our rap on the left and the visual on the right. So how we began is that we started with a steady beat till we got in a groove. And then we would invite the clients to join us in rapping. Ready, go. Following directions, taking turns. We're here in our group, so it's time to learn. Hands to yourself, pockets on the floor. These are the rules, there are 2 more. Gentle with the instruments, we want to treat them nice. Listen to the leader and we'll have a great time. Let's do it one more time. We usually invited the clients to do it at least twice, so that if they didn't do it the first time, they could have another opportunity. Ready, go. Following directions, taking turns. We're here in our group, so it's time to learn. Hands to yourself, pockets on the floor. These are the rules, there are 2 more. Gentle with the instruments, we want to treat them nice. Listen to the leader and we'll have a great time. Yeah. And that was our group rules wrap. We usually, after the wrap was done, we usually said, yeah, or that's groovy, man, or something like that, just to increase client engagement. All right, so the results of our overall treatment. So here we have the graph of the results that we got. This is for goal 1.0. This is over the whole course of our treatment, week 1 through week 8. Now, these are the percentages that we gained from our prompting hierarchy data collection, as I explained earlier, and as I demonstrated how we calculated the percentage from the intervention. This is the average percentage from this objective that we got every week. A quick visual analysis reveals that we started up here and then we went down and kind of stayed in this area, a little flat area, and near the end of treatment climbed back up a little bit. Goal 2.1. This data was all over the place, and we will discuss a little bit why in the evaluation section. But as you can see, there's a lot of bounce, there's a lot of variation in the results that we got with this goal. And then goal 3.0, a little bit of the same story. We've got a peak and a valley, but here at the end we've got an upward trend that we are starting to see. All right, now to evaluate these results. For goal 1.0, some possible explanations for the appearance of the data. So one explanation is that the group members who actually came to the session varied quite a bit from week to week. This meant that the different abilities that they were bringing to the table varied as well, and that would result in different levels of engagement in the interventions we were providing. It also, the data, the results that we got also depended on which targeted behavior we were focusing on in the intervention. So whether it was a leadership opportunity intervention, if it was a following leadership intervention, if it was a partnership intervention, that would determine the targeted behavior that we were looking for. And also a little bit of variation was caused by how well we as the therapists were observing the behavior and how well we were utilizing the prompting hierarchy. So one thing that we found as well is that interventions that involved client leadership in particular had produced higher scores. All right, goal 2.1. It's possible, upon reflection and looking at the patterns that we saw in our sessions, that the variations in our data were due to inconsistent promptings by the MTS. So utilizing the prompting hierarchy, making mistakes, inexperience with the prompting hierarchy, that would definitely yield some inconsistent results with this. Another interesting pattern that we saw was that the high points of data we saw were often connected to interventions of instrument play. And goal 3.0, an explanation for our data, our variations in the data, is that different clients would come to the sessions every week, so similar to goal 1.0. Different clients brought different abilities and also different patterns of unexpected behavior. So a possible explanation for the upward trend we're seeing here at the end is that nearing the end of our treatment, fewer and fewer clients tended to come, and that would yield fewer unexpected behaviors during transitions. As you can see, in week 4, we've got kind of a significant drop in our data. And after looking at what was going on that week, we thought that it could be connected to a lack of structure that was in the intervention. We had planned an intervention, but it had not gone especially as we had planned. And so that meant that the transition immediately after the intervention was also not very structured and could explain some of some of the lower scores that we were getting with as far as coping or emotional regulation went in the transition. So from our treatment, there were several future implications that we drew from it. So with this group, it's important that social skills and emotional regulation continue to be addressed. We did see some really golden moments and progression in their social skill building with leadership, with partnership, with following directions, or following leadership and emotional regulation, but there's still room for improvement and room for growth there. Because we saw that leadership was such an effective intervention, providing leadership opportunities was such an effective intervention, we found that to be very effective, and it would be a great thing to continue to implement with this group. Partnership opportunities are also important to continue to build those social skills. So another point that we found is that the client's level of participation increased during improvisation interventions and also when given opportunities for creative leadership. Again, important things to implement in future interventions, improvisation and opportunities for leadership. One thing that we found was that the clients often made sound effects or animal sounds when prompted to. And this specific one was brought on by, we were doing a sound sheet about a family of ducks. And as part of the sound sheet, the sound that we were supposed to make was quack like a duck. And what we found is that the clients got very, very engaged when they were supposed to quack like a duck. And this showed a great preference for vocalization. This experience, as well as others where they were given opportunities to vocalize, they showed increased engagement, showed that they have a preference for vocalization, and was a great way to get them engaged. So the final point here, the client engagement, yes. So clients danced, sang, or played instruments with increased engagement. Their engagement increased when preferred music was used. So going back to that musical / preferential domain that we assessed, when we utilized the music that they showed that they preferred, that their engagement increased. And we also gave them opportunities to continue sharing their favorite songs. And we asked them, what song should we play now? And they would give out new suggestions for songs we could do. And we saw increased engagement with that. Looking more generally at client engagement, there were at musical ways they were engaged, and also non-musical ways we kept them engaged. The musical ways has been spoken about a little bit before: active music making, improvisation, instrument play, lots of dancing, using sound sheets, telling stories. Non-musical interventions, providing leadership opportunities, allowing for client choice, whether it be for music being played or instrument choice or things like that. Implementing client choice was a great way to get clients engaged and interested. And finally, the prompting hierarchy, one of the major ways that we kept clients engaged and continuing to do the expected behavior. All right, termination of our treatment. For this group, due to COVID-19, our termination had to be expedited because of Thanksgiving break. And so the very last session that we had with them, we informed the clients that this was the last session, and we expressed regret at leaving, but we gave them great encouragement, and we complimented them on how well they had been doing and their great progress, the things that they had learned, and our continued hope that they would continue to learn with Danielle. And with that final termination session, we allowed for the clients to choose interventions that we had done in the past to redo, and we did that. And we played some of their favorite songs again, and we danced to them, and just opened it up for a repetition of past interventions, but allowing the clients to choose what to do. So what I learned, some of my other big takeaways from this experience, I learned a lot from the assessment process. one thing I learned is that it's really, really important to have observable behaviors that you're assessing, and have once you pin down the observable behavior you want to assess, creating a behavioral definition or an operational definition of that behavior, so that it is easily observable, it is easily measurable, and you can look at the behavior and know what is an instance of the behavior and what is not an instance of the behavior. So clearly defining what behavior you're looking for. Another thing that I drew from the assessment is that having a preliminary idea of the group's needs before you conduct your assessment is really useful, because the domains that we were given to assess in the beginning, they were very broad, and me and my partner were not very sure how to really focus our assessment. But we with extra help from Danielle, we were able to focus in a little bit and be able to draw goals and objectives from our assessment data. But as a takeaway, I learned how important it is to have a little bit better idea when given such a broad domain, what exactly to look for in assessment. So another big point, a big takeaway, is that fluency with the prompting hierarchy with this group was so critical, because the prompting hierarchy was such a fundamental part of data collection. It was a major intervention for our objectives. It was so incredibly important to be fluent with it, and to be familiar with starting at the top and then moving down with giving an indirect prompting first, then giving a direct verbal prompt, going down the hierarchy, instead of resorting to habitual ways of responding to clients, giving them the opportunity to respond with the greatest level of independence first, and then moving down from there. Another thing that I learned was to be assertive and take charge of your group. Sometimes when the clients were gathering and things were being prepared, different aides at the facility would try to take clients away from the group, or add a client to the group that maybe had to go to a different group. And of course, being sensitive to the moment and whether or not it was a serious thing, but being assertive and saying, no, this client needs to be in this group, they're our client, or no, don't take that client away, they really need their therapy today. I learned it was really important to be assertive and to own the group. A final point here is that over the course of treatment, several instruments were damaged or destroyed by clients. Some were handling the instruments quite aggressively, others, the instruments were just old and they broke. But this is what really prompted one of our group rules of treating the instruments gently in the group rule wrap. It's important to emphasize careful treatment of the instruments to the client, because unexpected things happen, and it's just important to lay down an expectation of being gentle with the instruments, especially when instruments are expensive. So to close, here is a brief summary of supporting research that went into my preparation for practicum this semester, as well as for this presentation. So much good information for this population, for special needs population, for autism spectrum disorder, so much great information. Here's just a little bit of what I learned and what I found. So one article I found just gave a very big picture view of the goals, objectives, and the treatments approaches to use with special needs populations. Really useful when you're just trying to get your feet grounded in what does treatment with this population look like. Another article I found showed that, well, several actually, this is just one example of several that there were with this point, but music therapy really is a very effective way to improve social skills. So many aspects of music allow it to be such a great modality for teaching social skills. Another article that I found showed that improvisation can improve communication and social interaction for children with ASD. And we definitely implemented that in our treatment because we used improvisation pretty frequently in our interventions. Another article showed that rhythm-based interventions can promote social skills for children with ASD. And we used a lot of rhythmic interventions, a lot of drumming, that kind of thing for our interventions. And another article, 2 articles, looks like, with social stories to teach social skills. A social story is a great tool to use because it makes the social skill you're trying to teach memorable. And we definitely saw that as we use different sound sheets to teach different social skills. And we just definitely saw that as an effective way to, an effective vehicle to teach social skills, social stories. Social stories are great for that. And another article showed that music can help in emotional regulation. This article talked a lot about the neurology behind music and emotional regulation. Excuse me. The neurology behind music and emotional regulation, but it also pointed out the clinical aspects and what specific things to implement in your clinical practice to help with emotional regulation. And finally, this article talked about how group processes can promote healing and reveal aspects of social dynamics in the therapeutic setting. One thing that Danielle emphasized to us a lot in this group was the importance of the group and how the group is the medium and the way to promote healing and to help these clients. So that is my presentation. Here is the bibliography. If you have any questions about the sources, if you would like to look up any of this information, feel free to draw from the bibliography that I created. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to respond and answer more specific questions that you might have. Thank you so much for listening.